Greetings from Bulgaria. I'm Volk, and this is Volk on your screen, my Sentinel. A little bit delayed, but it is time that I present to you my video guide for Sentinel Combat Discipline or Combat Spec. The mirror version is obviously Marauder Carnage Discipline. I will be showing and talking about the Sentinel terms and words because I've lately been playing that class a lot more. And because it's going to be easier for me to use specific terms instead of point out this skill compares with that skill and goes well with that skill. I would advise you to just make screenshots if you'd like to translate these for Marauder version and just look at the abilities. Most of them actually even have similar icons. Let's begin. First, the video will be structured in a few categories or periods or whatever you want to call them. First, I would like to talk about some of the changes, some of the more important changes that came with update 4.0. It's already 4.03, but it's still the same. Plus, Combat and Carnage didn't change that much compared to 3.0, as opposed to Watchman and Annihilation, for example. This is why I've rushed my Watchman and Annihilation guides a little bit too soon. I have 2 videos and a written guide for the Watchman discipline. If you've missed those, you might want to check them. I hope that you will like them. So let's start talking about combat. After the changes, quick review and overview, we will talk about gear, then we'll talk about skills. I'm going to go over primarily the left side because on the right side, the utilities, I have a special dedicated video about the utilities where I've explained in much more detail why I like this one or that one, why I don't like the third one and the fourth one, and so on and so on. There are a lot of interesting combinations regarding utilities depending on what you're doing. And this guide is actually more focusing on PvE and operation bosses. It's not about farming the operation dummy, and to some extent it may not be possible to copy and reflect that guide onto your PvP characters. You might need to do some adjustments specifically on the right side where the utilities sit. I'm still gonna show you a few basic combinations of utilities, and I'll tell you why I like this one combination and that one combination and why I consider them to be more global and available everywhere. Combat, by default, is one of the most burst damage dealing specs in the whole game, not just for the Sentinel disciplines, but for pretty much the whole game. It does have a very decent now in 4.0 filler phase, because you know when it comes to burst spec, you have a huge DPS dealt in small amount of time in short window, and then you have a filler phase while you're waiting for the big hitting abilities and cooldowns to pretty much come back to you and become available. Some of the changes Bioware did are actually global to the class. First, the main new ability is called Blade Blitz, and it has a 45-second cooldown. It's available at level 61. It quickly rushes for 20 meters, dealing weapon damage. The numbers are absolutely irrelevant here because they depend on your gear. It pushes you forward, dealing weapon damage to enemies in your path and increasing your defense chance by 100% while blitzing. So for about 2 seconds you will be immune because 100% defense is very powerful. It cannot be used while immobilized or hindered. Or actually, it can be used, but you'll have to spend some utility points. We'll talk about that later on. Let me very quickly demonstrate you how exactly this ability works. I'm gonna need some kind of a leveled space. Obviously, you don't need the target, and you have to be extra careful because this ability only stops when you pass the 20th meter or when you fall down. So it's actually not that easy to find a good spot to use it. Fantastic new ability for PvP, allows for very decent mobility, especially when you're fighting snipers, for example. I pretty much couldn't find any decent use for it in PvE. You might stick it here or there, you might find it useful here or there, but very situational. Some other changes. Bioware rearranged a few of the basic left side, passive and active abilities. In case you don't know, the abilities marked with a green square on the border are the active abilities. They are now granted at level 10, 26, 42, and 58, which means every 16 levels you will gain a new special unique to this discipline ability. Obviously you will be gaining from your trainers a lot more basic abilities specific to combat and not so specific to combat. But these 4 are the best and amongst the most important ones. And then again, every 4 levels, starting at level 12, 16, 24, and so on, you will be getting passive abilities. They are granted to you. Everything on the left side is automatically granted to you as soon as you level up. You will just have to visit a vendor and pick up for free more abilities. At level 17, 25, 33, 41, 49, 57, and the final one now at 65, you will gain 7 utility points. Each one of these triangles reflects reflects 1 utility point that you will be able to spend here. In the skillful tree, you need to spend at least 3 if you want to progress into the next one. This actually is a bug currently. It's not supposed to be a blank space. Trailblazer is in fact a very useful skill, but let's not stray too much. When you activate 3 abilities or more, obviously, you unlock Masterful. To be able to progress through Masterful and into Heroic, you need to have 5 abilities, but you don't need to have 2 abilities on the Masterful. You can select 2 abilities on the Skillful. As long as you have 5 in total and at least 3 in the first tier, you already unlock the last. And this means for the last tier of heroic utilities, you are allowed to pick 2 of them, no more. You can pick 0 if you prefer, or just 1. But again, I will be talking about utilities later on. Let's start exploring some of the descriptions of the most important abilities, actives and passive. I'm already in combat spec, and as you know, a Taro form is the form to use when you're playing Combat Sentinel. It's also a Taro form for the Carnage Marauder. Alacrity is increased, chance to hit to trigger a second free attack. All right, awesome. One another basic change to all Sentinels and Marauder, just to the Sentinels, my apologies. Blade Dance used to be called Master Strike because the word strike was used in some passive abilities, but the ability Master Strike didn't benefit from those passives, but we decided to just rename it. It's the same one as before. It plays out and performs exactly as before, which means it deals a number of hits. The last one, by the way, is about 0.2, 0.3 seconds before the end of the channel. We'll talk about this as a hint or a tip how to increase DPS when we go to combinations and skill priorities. But for now, just wanted to inform you that Blade Dance is the same as Master Strike with a different name. And now it is time to explore some of these abilities. As I've mentioned, the Taro form is granted to you at level 10. Enter an acrobatic lightsaber form, increasing alacrity by 3%. In addition, your successful melee attack have a 20% chance to trigger a second strike that deals weapon damage. Again, the numbers here vary depending on your gear. This effect cannot occur more than once every 1.5 seconds. In case you didn't know, the global cooldown in the game for all of the classes is 1.5 seconds. Alacrity can alter this and lower it. The next one is a passive for Taro Savi. While a Taro form is active, Cyclone Slash triggers an Taro form strike on each enemy target it damages. This is why for AoE situations, I will be talking about those when we come to skill priorities later, Cyclone Slash is the one to use during precision. The next one is another passive dual wield mastery. It increases the damage dealt with offhand lightsaber attacks by 25%. After that we go to Taro mastery, which increases the damage dealt by your triggered Taro form attacks by 5%. Righteous Zeal reduces the cooldown of Zilla Strike by 3 seconds. Zilla Strike is your main, or if not main, at least best focus builder, because it strikes the target multiple times with both lightsabers, dealing weapon damage and building 6 focus. 6 is a huge number. It requires 2 lightsabers, obviously, or swords. You don't need to use lightsabers. If you're playing a Sentinel, you always need to have 2 weapons. Blade Rush is one of the most important abilities. You need to basically spam this like mad, so put it on a comfortable keybind, or maybe if you're clicking with the mouse. I don't recommend that, but that's a different topic. put it somewhere where you can easily reach it. This is one of the most used abilities. Blade Rush, granted level 26, requires 3 focus and has a melee range of 4 meters. Everything melee is 4 meters. Strike the target with both weapons for weapon damage and automatically triggers an Aetherform strike, bypassing Aetherform's rate limit. For 6 seconds after using Blade Rush, your Aetherform has an extra 30% chance to be triggered. It also requires 2 lightsabers. Obviously, you need to spam this, and because, as I've mentioned already, Aetherform has a 20% chance to spam to trigger a second attack. With Blade Rush, you automatically trigger Aetherform regardless of those percentages within the Aetherform. So it's actually Blade Rush plus an extra damage. The next one is Opportune Attack, very important boost. Damage dealt by Aetherform grants Opportune Attack, which makes your next Blade Storm or Clashing Blast deal 5% more damage and sunder the target for 45 seconds. Sunder target have their armor rating reduced by 20%. Pretty much you will have that debuff on your target or enemy most of the time, and Opportune Attack is a very important buff to have. I will show you later on how it looks when you get the icon and what to do with it. The next one is level 2 combat, level 32, forgive me, Combat Trance. When opportunity is consumed by Blade Storm or Clashing Blast, you build 1 focus. After that, we get to Immaculate Force. Opportune Attack now additionally increases the critical chance of Blade Storm and Clashing Blast by 100%. Remember, Opportune Attack deals is triggered by Aetherform, and it first increased 5% your Clashing Blast damage and gives you armor debuff, and then a few levels later at level 36 it is boosted once again by giving Blade Storm and Clashing Blast 100% chance. So Clashing Blast is actually an upgrade to Blade Storm. That's why nobody is using Blade Storm once they gain Clashing Blast at level 58. Clashing Blast must only and ever only be used with Opportune Attack. This, by the way, is exactly the same icon that would appear here when it procs, and also you would know it procs because there's going to be a flashy yellowish goldish border around the ability. That's a Q BioWare implemented with, I believe, 3.0 to alarm and alert players when some abilities are ready and proccing already. We continue further down. Saber Screen. When your Aetherform deals damage, your damage reduction in melee and range defense are increased by 2%, stacks up to 3 times and lasts for 3 seconds. This is also a passive buff that you should pretty much have all the time. Precision. The single most important both active and passive abilities. You need to activate it, but you don't need a target anymore. BioWare changed that a while ago. The ability is now triggered automatically on its own, just like Deadly Saber, for example, or never mind. Let's not start naming other abilities. Precision increases armor penetration by 100% for 3 seconds. Requires 2 lightsabers, obviously. I should stop reading those last lines. Precision lasts for 3 seconds exactly. It's not affected by alacrity, but its cooldown is affected by alacrity because you see it's supposed to be on a round number cooldown and not 10.9 seconds. Continuing down the line, we have Swift Blades. Reduces the cooldown of Blade Storm and Clashing Blast. Remember, Blade Storm is the early ability, Clashing Blast is the upgrade at level 58. So, it reduces the cooldown of Clashing Blast by 3 seconds and the focus they consume by 1. So, Clashing Blast by default is supposed to take 4 focus, but because you're already gaining levels and you reach level, forgive me, that's Swift Blades at 44, you will be using Clashing Blast at the expense of only 3 focus. Hands of Justice is a level 48 passive. Damage dealt by Aetherform triggers Hand of Justice, which finishes the cooldown on dispatch and makes your next dispatch usable on a target at any health level without consuming any focus. This effect cannot occur more often than once every 20 seconds. By default, Dispatch is a sub 30% ability. The description goes as follows. Throws the main hand lightsaber at a target, dealing energy damage, only usable on targets at or below 30% of their max HP. It has a 9-second basic cooldown, which, as we already learned from Hand of Justice, every 20 seconds it can be triggered and bypass the cooldown, making the ability flashing because it's proccing, and available for use free. So you don't need to have 3 focus. It's a free ability, and it's very important to make everything you can in your power to combine this patch within a precision window. Again, I'm going to talk a little bit later about this. Next one is Force Health. Increases damage reduction by 2%. In addition, Twin Saber Throw builds 2 focus. Twin Saber Throw is now a fantastic building focus ability. Efficient Strike. While a Terraform is active, Zen reduces the focus consumed by Blade Rush and Cyclone Slash by 1. Remember, Blade Rush is one of the main abilities, and Cyclone Slash is... forgive me, where the hell is it? There it is, sorry. Cyclone Slash is a frontal AoE ability. And all of these are beneficial during Zen. Continuing down the line, we reach Clashing Blast. Takes 3 focus and has a cooldown of what's supposed to be 9 seconds, but it's been brought down to 8.2 due to my alacrity. 10-meter range, so this is kind of a semi-ranged ability. Very, very useful for PvP. And of course, one of the main abilities in PvE as well. Unleashes a powerful blast of force energy at the target, dealing energy damage. The blast stuns standard and weak enemies for 5 seconds. You don't really need to care about this in endgame. It doesn't happen pretty much anywhere unless you're farming dailies. And replaces Blade Storm. I forgot to mention it because it's part of the description. Saber Storm is now granted at level 60. I just wanted to mention that, by the way, the active ability Clashing Blast used to be granted at level 59, but BioWare decided to have one new ability every 16 level, as I mentioned, this green line or diagonal, and now it's been moved to level 58. Not a big change, since this is a guide actually for endgame. We don't really care pretty much what level do we get these abilities. At level 65 we've got all of them. At level 60 we gain increased of critical damage bonus of Blade Rush and Clashing Blast by 15%. That's a fantastic passive bonus. Once again, Blade Rush is this ability. Of course, you can pause the video and read the description every single time I'm mousing over these things. And the other one is Clashing Blast, again, the other main ability. They should be used pretty much on cooldown. Burning Slices is a level 64 passive, a new one. Damage dealt by Blade Dance stacks a burning effect on the target that builds up to 3 charges and deals up to whatever the amount here is, elemental damage over 9 seconds. This is BioWare's answer for patch 4.0 and going further to increase the stable and steady damage dealing from the Combat Sentinel and make it a little bit more sustained during the build-up phase. Because Blade Dance should be only ever used during precision and never outside of it. And while you're doing it, you're actually building those stacks. They do build themselves if you finish the channel of Blade Dance. If you don't finish it, obviously you will not get the 3 stacks. That's why it's important to have the full channel duration of Blade Dance whenever you're using the ability. And this concludes the portion where I was going over all of the abilities. I would like to mention specifically some of the active abilities and buffs that are most important for the gameplay of the Sentinel. Obviously, Force Leap, because it has a minimum 10-meter range and a relatively long cooldown. With my alacrity, it's 13.6 seconds. It jumps to a distant target, dealing damage. With the main hand weapon, immobilizing the target for 2 seconds and interrupting the target's current action. The interrupt is actually very important for many boss fights. It also builds 3 focus. Cannot be used against targets in cover. That's for PvP, snipers, example, or gunslingers. Force Leap is always your opening ability. Whenever you start a PvE fight or PvP as well, you should aim to have Force Leap available, so don't stay closer than 10 meters from the target. The next one I will go over and explain a little bit in more detail with Zilla Strike. Again, with the proper alacrity, I'm going to talk about stats and priorities in a moment, don't worry. The cooldown should be about that much, 10.9 seconds. It is a melee ability and it builds 6 focus. Very important to use it as soon as possible when it's out of cooldown, but do not waste it. For example, if your focus bar is, let's say, 8 out of 12, there is no need to use Zealous Strike because it deals very little damage and it actually doesn't benefit building 6 focus. You can't build 8 plus 6, 14 because the cap is on 12 points of focus. So pretty much time it wisely. It should obviously also be used during the build-up phase. Why I keep talking about build-up phase? Because everything important for the combat and carnage spec happens during precision for the sentinels and gore for the marauders. Precision, as I've mentioned earlier, increases armor penetration by 100% for 3 seconds. That's not armor penetration on a target. That's armor penetration for all of your abilities used within the next 3 seconds. And usually those are 2 abilities. If you have low server latency, you might be able to squeeze in 3 abilities, but it's really tricky. And most of the time in boss environments, it's close to impossible. So the build-up phase includes strike, twin saber throw, and blade rush. Sometimes, but depending on the cooldown of Hand of Justice that procs dispatch, you might use dispatch outside of the burst phase. The burst phase consists of precision. During the 3 seconds of precision, you need to prioritize the available damaging abilities. First in the priority list comes Blade Dance, especially combining it with Zen, because Zen for Altaru form grants 30% alacrity. Each attack consumes 1 charge, and when activating Zen, first you need to have 30 stacks of centering. When you activate Zen, you gain 6 charges of it, and during these 6 charges, you need to use as many attacks as you can, which means you also have lower alacrity, making everything go quicker, happen quicker, and all of the cooldowns of the abilities are also quicker. In the burst phase, after you activate precision, you go with Blade Dance, and you have space and time for 1 more ability. The biggest priority for me personally is Clashing Blast. But as I've mentioned again, Clashing Blast depends very, very heavily on opportune attack. If Clashing Blast is not proccing, in other case, if it's not marked in yellow border, do not use it. Let's maybe move towards the dummy so I can show you a couple of tricks. Where the hell was the dummy? The other way around. Here we are in front of the dummy. I will be doing things slower so I can actually talk in between the ability usage and explain some things to you. The first thing we do is always sleep. The second ability I usually do would be building focus with Zealous Strike, and then I would use Blade Rush, because Blade Rush will give me opportune attack, and then we go precision very, very quick, if possible, of course, if I don't lose combat, Blade Dance. And in the end, you can actually, I'll show you that in a moment, in the end you finish with Clashing Blast. This is I will probably have it in the written form here or there or somewhere. But this is one of the best and most basic openers. So I would like to show you once again something. Precision and then Blade Dance quickly, and you try and watch the channel line. If you manage to cut the channel in the last 0.2 or 0.3 seconds, you don't lose damage from Blade Dance, because the last damage, if you check your combat logs, you will find that I'm correct and I'm right. The last damage coming from the series of hits from Blade Dance is dealt about 2.4, 2.5 seconds before the end. This is 2.2 or this is 0.2 or 0.3 seconds before the end of the channel, allowing you to squeeze another ability. While I'm telling you this, because combining it with Zen, so we have 30 stacks of centering. I will convert that to Zen. I will use precision, then I will use Twin Saber Throw in the build phase, but then immediately after that, I will use precision, because when pressing Twin Saber Throw, you have like split 0.1, 0.2 seconds to activate quickly precision, and the damage dealt by Saber Throw will go under the effect of precision. Let's see if I can make that happen. And I think I've missed it by a little much. That's probably because my server lag is very high or very unstable at the moment. I wouldn't recommend you guys doing this in real environment, but if you do that combination, you would probably see that all precision, blade dance and clashing blast will fall under the effect of precision, and that's very important because it gives you one more ability under the effect of precision, which means one more ability will penetrate 100% of the armor of whatever opponent you're hitting. Another useful combination, again with precision, everything involves precision and everything is about precision when you're playing combat. Again, precision equals gore for the Marauder. Another useful combination, always, again, always, if you have this proc. That's how it looks when it's procking, and this one is procking as well because of opportune attack. And there we have here Hand of Justice, which has cooldown running out, and you have to be mindful of Hand of Justice. You don't want to miss the proc for this patch when your target is above 30%. Obviously, when the target is below 30%, you can use this patch on cooldown if you prefer. But remember that with the buff, with the proc, it also costs no focus. So there is another combination: precision, clashing blast, and obviously I ran out of power, out of focus. Let's build it up. Precision, clashing blast, and in the end this patch. You can use that without Zen. My recommendation is whenever you have 30 stacks of centering, you need to use them immediately as you have them, regardless of what point of the fight and which abilities do you have on cooldown. This is a huge boost, having 30 stacks of Zen and 30 stacks of centering and turning them into Zen, because once again, if you have forgotten, Ataru form and Zen grants you 30% alacrity, and this means everything is happening 30% faster. Your dots from blade dance, your abilities are happening faster, their cooldowns are faster, the global cooldown in the game also is reflected, and for the combat sentinels it's much lower than 1.5 seconds depending on your alacrity. More important and viable abilities, Valorous Call, obviously not to be used on cooldown, but be mindful because of its long cooldown, 2 minutes and 15 seconds. You need to be very precise and know the fight and be sure where you want to use that and when your sentinel needs that special boost. Valorous Call, let's lose a Valorous Call and immediately build 30 stacks of centering. I've already used it during this video, so you probably grasped the idea. This, everything I've been mentioning so far regarding precision and the different kinds of combination. One more thing, obviously, when you start a combination with precision, if you don't have any of the big hitters for some reason, sometimes in boss fights it may happen that maybe your abilities didn't proc, or maybe they just are still on cooldown. If you don't have Blade Dance, Clashing Blast and this patch, it doesn't mean that you need to hold off precision. No, you need to use precision as soon as possible when it's out of cooldown. Maybe in some cases you can delay it with one global cooldown, but remember, all of these delays, they're costing you damage. So if you need to, you can use precision and spam Blade Rush. It's still better than not using precision and waiting for other abilities to go on cooldown. And I believe these are the most important and thoughtful and useful combinations under precision for single target damage dealing. One important thing that I've mentioned earlier during the exploration of the left side of the discipline tree, precision is very nicely combined with Cyclone Slash. Cyclone Slash shades up to 8 enemies, slashes up to 8 enemies with 5 meters in front of you for weapon damage. Attacks with both weapons if dual wielding. Cyclone Slash may seem like a small damaging ability, but when you combine it with precision and especially with Zen, it becomes very powerful. And remember, once again, it hits up to 8 enemies and it hits everything in front of you. This is very, very nice, and you might think that Force Sweep is better because it actually shows. Let me just compare the two abilities. The maximum damage in my case with the buffs I have available at the moment is 2795, and the maximum damage from Force Sweep seems to be 3107. It may seem higher, but remember that there was a passive up there in the left side of the discipline tree that gives you a Ataru proc on each target on Cyclone Slash, which makes it a lot more powerful skill. Plus, I don't know if that's true. Maybe it depends on latency. I've been testing this for 4 years, believe it or not, and I still cannot prove it. Force Sweep seems to have some very weird delay. Very quick demonstration of how to use it. Go precision, and then you do this. Cyclone Slash. For AoE situations, you pretty much want to spam Cyclone Slash all the time, and obviously rotate your character so you can fit as many enemies in front of you as possible. Another combination, but again you need a lower server latency. Server latency is that number. For me currently it's 73. That's kind of low, but not low enough. I know that many of you are playing with the range of 20, 30 lag, maybe even lower than 20. If you would like, you could use Force Sweep, then immediately use Precision, and then start with Cyclone Slash. In many cases, if you perform this perfectly, it will include Force Sweep into or under the Precision effect, just like the thing I showed you earlier with Twin Saber Draw. This combination or this trick you can perform with pretty much every ability. So for example, if you would like to, you could say use Dispatch, then quickly enter Precision, and then spam Clashing Blast and one quick Blade Rush. In ideal world, I've proven that to myself in combat logs, it's possible. But depending on your lag as in FPS issues during boss fights, and server lag, which is latency, it comes to nearly impossible to perform that always in boss fights or, God forbid, in PvP. PvP lag is just unbearable. I would definitely not advise you to try this in PvP. This is, I think, everything I wanted to share about abilities. Obviously, I didn't cover all of the abilities, but some things I would leave to your imagination or reasons to write me comments and ask about things. And because I don't want the video to stretch to an hour, I already see it's past the half-an-hour mark. Let's talk about statistics. BioWare changed a lot of things with the gearing process, and they made critical stat important, or the most important, I should say, for pretty much every DPS class. Yes, you will see that my Sentinel now has 39.41% crit, whereas in my guide for 3.0 and before that my guide for 2. Whatever it was, I forgot, I was suggesting 0 crit from gear. No, the things have changed dramatically now. Crit has become the most important stat for the Sentinel Combat and for pretty much every DPS, but we're focusing on the Combat Sentinel and Carnage Marauder. One thing I would like to point out in the very beginning, first, my gear is, okay, two things. First, my gear is not optimal yet. This is because I'm not rushing things. All of the operations currently are something I've done years ago in all modes, and I've been progressing through them since 2011, so I've decided not to rush. That's why you will see many things are still 220, including my main hand, unfortunately. And God forbid I have a 216 Defiant or Defiant Relic of Serendipitous Assault. But let's talk about gear. The mods, you don't really have a choice for mods anymore. By mods, I mean are actually the real mod, because we by default call all of these mods. The mods you're using now are always called little mod, and depending on the item level, it's gonna be 42 for 216, 43 for 220, or 44, I believe it was, for 224. And I think the boss on Zyos drops at 228 or 227. Since I haven't had a chance to do him yet, I don't know what the mods are called. It doesn't matter which mod or which item gives you what stat, as long as you build with the special priority. First, you begin with accuracy. I said critical is most important because you need a higher percent of it, but accuracy has also changed a little bit. You will see that my melee accuracy now is exactly the same as my force accuracy. This is because BioWare changed the internal ways of calculations, and they've altered the formula a little bit. So all of the DPS classes now require 110% accuracy. That is a perfect number in raw numbers, in raw things. And if I remember correctly, it was 685. Mine at the moment is 699. That's why you see 0.17% over the top. This is really wasting points and wasting stats, because everything that goes above 110% accuracy is a total waste of gear. Sometimes you don't have a choice. If you manage to, with 224 gear, this is the way to achieve it. 685 is the exact number you should be able to achieve if your character is fully geared with all the appropriate mods, enhancements, armorings, and everything else. Augments I forgot to mention. And 685 results in, correct me if I'm mistaken, 109%, 0.97 or 98. And these 0.02% that you will be lacking from the perfect 110, they really never show up, so do not worry about that. Get accuracy as close as possible to 110. As soon as that happens, you don't need to care how you get it. You can use all of the left side, your earpiece and implants may all have accuracy. As long as you start building accuracy and you reach 110, you stop caring about that and you start paying attention to your other stats. It's not like I need always to have 10 augments with accuracy, 2 augments with alacrity, 1 augment with crit, because that's someone suggested me to do things. No, you want your class to be optimal all the time. And this means rebalancing and changing things. That's why most of the time when I'm doing live streams, you would see that in my inventory, I always have a few enhancements, a few mods, and even armorings leftovers, because when I upgrade an item, most of the times this item doesn't have the exact same stats boosting from the item that I have slotted. For example, if I decide to upgrade my chest piece with a new item, the new item may come, this is just a raw example, it's not exactly how it happens. It might happen that my chest piece, for example, would come with accuracy, and as you see, my enhancement has critical. If I get accuracy and lose critical, I will have to balance this somewhere else. It's always important to pick the implants and earpieces first, in my opinion. It doesn't really matter that much anymore what stats you will have, because stats are a lot easier to balance now in 4.0, but this is just like a habit of mine from before 4.0, when you always wanted to start measuring your stats and calculating your stats from the earpiece and implants, because they used to be the hardest one, the toughest ones to obtain. But anyway, very quick mouse over so I can show you whatever gear I have, and I will continue talking about the other stats in a moment. I'm moving too fast, I know, but you can always pause the video and take a screenshot or whatever. The next I would like to talk about is another change for crit. Crit stat now combines critical and surge. You cannot build those two things separately now. Critical and surge go together. When you put crit in your gear, you improve both critical, this is a chance to have a critical hit, and the magnitude of that crit, which is the crit multiplier, or as we might remember it, surge. That's what it used to be called. Surge as a standalone stat doesn't exist anymore. That's why I've said that it's a lot easier to jiggle with stats from your gear now. Many of them have the same options, and you don't really have to worry about enhancements with power, accuracy, crit, surge, and God knows what else. These are the percentages I do like. They're not set in stone. You don't have to copy the exact same percentages. You don't have to copy anything from my guide. My guide and all of my guides that I've always done regarding whether it's a Sentinel Marauder on any other class or boss mechanic or something else, my guides are exactly that, guides. They are setting the pathway for you if you're a newer player, or if you've never played the class before, or if you played the class on basic level and you don't want to improve. Once you take my advice, you would modify it to your personal liking, and you might end up not liking to have critical rating 1395. You might be satisfied with 1300, 1300. Alacrity is suggested, or I suggest, to keep it about 10%. Remember, all of these numbers and stats are with including all of the class buffs and the best available at the moment, advanced, anodyne, versatile steam. Playing without those buffs is just nerfing yourself, and you don't want to do that. Yes, I can remove all these buffs, but I don't want to, because you need to always be playing with them. Maybe you can remove, or actually not use, the versatile steam, which increases mastery and power, obviously, just like it says here. but they're cheap enough, and I would recommend you keep them on, if possible, all the time. They're really much cheaper and much easier to obtain than ever before, even though they're consumables now and they don't stay forever with you if you're a biochem. That's a different topic. Again, a quick summary, because I think I might have gone for a little bit too long with this. You start with accuracy, get it to 110 or as close as possible. Then you focus on critical and you bring critical to about 39-ish%, depending on your personal lacking. If you have lower critical, you have a higher alacrity. There is no other combination, but remember that when you're lowering critical, you're also lowering the critical multiplier. Why is critical useful for Combat Sentinel when the biggest hitting abilities are always granted to crit, like Clashing Blast, for example? Because when an ability has a proc for a guaranteed crit, these 39.41% with a special formula are translated and they boost your critical multiplier. They don't stack to each other, so you won't have 3941 plus 6892, but that 6892 is gonna be boosted by a certain amount from the critical. So having critical, what I meant to say, is never a waste of stat and never a waste of point anymore, as of the changes BioWare did with patch 4.0. After you finish building the critical to whatever point you like, you can start building alacrity. I would again recommend alacrity be around the 640 mark, but it's your personal preference and depending on what you want to do. Another thing that helps you boost stats is obviously the datacrons, because all the datacrons are now related to mastery. Probably forgot to mention that in the very beginning, but it's not related just to the Sentinel Combat. Mastery is now the new main stat for every single class. We don't have aim, willpower, cunning, and strength. Everything has been transformed into mastery. So it's actually kind of easier to switch gear around. Yes, you would lose the set bonus, but for example, if you want to, you can transfer your gear from your Sentinel or Marauder over to, let's say, your Sniper. You would still hit hard, you will be lacking the set bonus. Set bonus is a must, obviously. If you have an older set bonus, I would suggest do not replace the armorings that have a set bonus with armorings that do not have, but they are higher level. Set bonus is more important than the plus whatever stats you would gain, mastery and endurance, from the newer and better higher level armoring. It's not really better. On the augment side, when it comes to gearing and statistics, absolutely doesn't matter how many augments you use with crit, with alacrity, or with anything else. The one thing that I need to point out is that you need to use augments with crit and alacrity. There is no need to use anything else. Maybe if you find yourself lacking possible options to build the accuracy, you could use 1 or 2, hell, even 5 accuracy augments, depending on whatever you need to do and whatever your other mods are bringing you as stats and boosts. But do not stack augments with power and mastery. No. Power and mastery are now on the bottom of the stacking statistics, on the bottom of the table now. They're not good. Critical and alacrity provide a lot more now for the Sentinel. Yes, I've mentioned multiple times in my previous guides that alacrity is crap and I never liked it because it has very little role in real boss encounters and boss environments in operations. To some extent, it does have good value in it had good value in PvP, but now alacrity has been changed even further and it's easier to stack and it's a lot more beneficial. Now, because I actually wrapped up the video and then realized I haven't said pretty much a word about some possible utility combinations, I'm going to insert this very brief and short portion right in here and remind you again that there is a much more detailed video where I went through all of the descriptions of the Sentinel utilities and I've shared my observations, which one is good, where, how, why, what combinations of utilities are useful, where, for which bosses, and so on. But for now, let me just show you a couple of utility combinations. This is one of my most favorite combinations because it includes Trailblazer, a fantastic combat booster for AoE environments, farming dailies, farming solo things, or farming quick killing, not farming trash pools in operations. And some bosses that have AoE and multiple adds really provoke you to use Trailblazer because it boosts the Cyclone Slash. So this is one of my most favorite combinations. Let me show you something else. I will commit and reset. There is another one combination that I also like to use a lot. This is another one possible. I usually combine Jedi Crusader and Jedi Enforcer together. Stoic, I believe, is a must-have in pretty much whatever combination you're doing and wherever you're going, it needs to be here. For many bosses, having Ardor is useful because it alters and boosts the usage of Transcendence. It makes it available outside of the 30 stacks of centering for Transcendence and on basic cooldown for 30 seconds. I usually pretty much always pick defensive role, unless of course the content is really like, well, it's not exactly easy, but I would call it easy because now hard modes are relatively easy compared to the new nightmares. And most of the time I do use Force Fade because I like to move fast. It increases my movement speed by 15%, and as a melee DPS, especially if you have a day with higher latency on your server, whatever your server is, you might benefit from quicker movement due to a slower reaction or slow server response time. And then from the heroic, I very often put 1 point on Jedi Promulgator because each use of Strike, Zealous Strike and Leg Slash reduces the active cooldown of Rebuke by 3 seconds. Do you remember Rebuke? It has 1 minute cooldown and it's also boosted by Jedi Enforcer and Jedi Crusader. So this 1 point spent here on Jedi Promulgator just boosts it one step further. Rebuke is both defensive and offensive ability. Read the description of the ability and you will know what I mean if you don't know already. Let me try and pick another kind of more specific combination of utilities. So we'll go with these 3 again because I pretty much always have those 3. And then, for example, we might put points here, here. We could use defensive row, but sometimes it's actually good to have fleet-footed. Fleet-footed is very useful for situational boss fights. When Transcendence is applied or refreshed, it purges movement impairing effect. Additionally, the movement speed bonus of Transcendence is increased by 30%. Fleet-footed, usually I find it useful for bosses such as Bug Lurker or Underbugger. Sorry, the real name is really Underlurker, the 3rd boss from Temple of Sacrifice. And the last point, I might put in Expunging Camouflage because Force Camouflage removes all cleansable effects when activated. It sounds awesome, but it actually doesn't really work everywhere. Most of the time it does, but there are some boss encounters where it doesn't really cleanse anything and everything. You might be wondering why and how I don't use Contemplation. That reduces the cooldown of all by 15 seconds. In addition, you build up 30 centering stacks over the course of using Introspection. You know what that is? Let me show you. Just while you're meditating, your stacks are actually building up. And I love this one, but probably just only for PvP. It's very rare and situational where I would find use of Contemplation in a PvE environment, specifically for operations. Useful for farming dailies because you fight a lot of weak mobs, and it's always nice to have these 30 stacks of centering, this 1 stack of 30 centering, forgive me, for, let's say, the upcoming boss if you're soloing a heroic or something else. It's not necessary. So again, that's why I'm not using it. I do give more priority to Jedi Promulgator. If I have to use something, it's usually that one. And for some specific bosses, I also switch between other abilities. Let's say 4th boss in the Ravagers is actually benefiting from Enduring because it increases the duration of Guarded by the Force by 2 seconds and reduces its cooldown by 30 seconds, allowing me to take those nasty stacks from the little guy. You know, the fight is a big droid and a little droid, or Master and Blaster. And when the Master is focusing someone, the nearest person, that usually at some point is me, when that happens, I would like to have those 2 extra stacks, 2 extra seconds on my Guarded by the Force because it makes me immune and I can take a little bit more non-damage or 0 damage before the stacks of the light of the beam on me start really hurting me. For more, again, please visit the separate video. I don't want to make this too long and too complicated. That's pretty much all I wanted to say in this video guide. It went for far too long and I have no intention to cut anything from it. So if you notice that I'm cutting something somewhere, just throw me a dislike. If you like the video, please share it so other people can find it useful eventually, or at least take a look. And don't forget to like it if you haven't subscribed yet. You've just watched 40 something minutes of my video content and I guess you liked it, so throw me a subscription. Do not forget to visit my website regularly because there are a lot of news, blog posts, updates, written guides, and God knows what else that I care to share and have time available to write before that. Subscribe to my newsletter, and as a token of your gratitude, if you're buying things from Amazon.com or G2A, the gaming platform, you might consider using my referral links. Please do that. One last thing, check out my Patreon page. Maybe you would like to pledge a couple dollars per month or more, and you could pick some special rewards that I have selected there. Thank you guys very much for watching this video. I know that no guide is ever complete, so whenever there is need to add something or change something, or I don't know, just talk about something, we can do that down in the comments. If you have questions, ask them away. I read absolutely everything and I really do my best to answer as many of the questions and comments as I possibly can, but sometimes I don't really have the time. I will see you with the next Star Wars: The Old Republic video. Bye bye.